Okay, now that we've gone through a little bit of an introduction about zeros of polynomials, and we've talked about the rational zero theorem, let's go through and list the possible rational zeros of this polynomial using the rational zero theorem. So P is going to be all the possible factors of our constant. That's this here, so I'll color coordinate here. P is going to be all the possible factors of -3. So we would have plus or minus 3 and plus or minus 1. All of those numbers will divide into 3. Now, for the Q, that's all the possible factors of our leading coefficient. So that's all the possible factors of 4. The possible factors of 4 are 4, 2, and 1. Those are all the numbers that divide into 4 evenly. So now if we want to check all the combinations of P over Q, that will give me all the possible rational zeros of the polynomial. So I want to find plus or minus all of these combinations. So on the top, I would have 3 and 1. On the bottom, I would have 4, 2, and 1. So when I list out the possibilities, I could take 3 over 4. I could take 3 over 2, or 3 over 1, which is just 3. Then I could have 1 over 4, 1 over 2, or 1 over 1, which is 1. And of course, all of these could be plus or minus. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have 12 possibilities because for each one I have plus and minus of those. So instead of looking at all the rational numbers and trying to plug in to see which one gives me 0, it comes down to just 12. So the rational zero theorem really helps us narrow down where our focus should be when we're looking for zeros. Okay, so now that we went through an example on how to use the rational zero theorem to find the possibilities, what I want to do with you now is to actually go through and use that to find the zeros of a polynomial. So I'm going to go through the steps with you. The first step is to find the possible zeros using the rational zero theorem. Then the next step is to check the possibilities to see which ones are actual zeros. And you can do this on your calculator. So, for example, if one of my possibilities was 3, I would plug 3 into my polynomial and see if I get out a 0. If I don't get out a 0, then it's not a 0. If I plug in 3 and I do get out a 0, then I would consider 3 one of my actual zeros. So the rational zero theorem only gives us some possibilities. From there, we have to check which ones are the actual rational zeros. Sometimes you don't get any, and sometimes you'll get all of them all at once. It just depends on the polynomial. And instead of plugging in each one individually, you could save yourself a little bit of work and use the table feature on your calculator, which I'm going to put a video on how to do that in case you don't know how to do that at the end of this lesson. So you can use the table feature on your calculator to set up an XY chart to plug in values of X to find the corresponding values of Y and see which ones give you zeros. So after we find the possible zeros, then step 2 is to actually check those and see which ones are actual zeros by seeing which ones will give you 0 as the corresponding Y value. Then what you're going to do once you find the actual zeros, you're going to use the actual zeros to factor the polynomial as much as possible. Then step 4 is to use additional methods such as quadratic formula to finish factoring if needed. Okay, and then the last step is to actually list all the zeros. So these are the directions. Now we're starting off with a nice easy one. This one works out really nicely. Notice that this is a degree 3 polynomial, which means I should have 3 zeros. Whatever the degree is, if it's degree 4, then I should have 4 zeros. So if I have a degree 4 and I found 3 zeros, I should know that I should have 1 more zero. I'm not done yet. Okay, so I'm going to find my possibilities P over Q. So I'm going to list all the possible factors of my constant. My constant is 6. So I'm going to have plus or minus 6, 3, 2, and 1. My possible factors of my leading coefficient, since my leading coefficient is 1, the only possible factors are 1. When I list out all my combinations, I get 6 over 1, 3 over 1, 2 over 1, and 1 over 1. So these are my possible factors. Now I want to find my actual zeros by plugging in those 8 choices. I say 8 choices because 6, 3, 2, and 1 is actually both positive and negative. So I want to plug in positive 6 into the polynomial, and then I want to check negative 6. Then I want to plug in positive 3, and then I want to plug in negative 3. So even though it looks like I have 4 choices, I actually have 8 possibilities because it's plus and minus. When I go through and I plug all of those in, what I'm going to find out is that I have 3 rational zeros. When I plug in negative 3 into my polynomial, I'm going to get out 0. When I plug in 2 into my polynomial, I'm going to get out 0. And when I plug in negative 1 into my polynomial, I'm going to get out 0. So I have all of them right here. Since it's a degree 3, I know I should have 3 zeros. And the nice thing about this is that all of them are rational, so I don't have to go through steps 3 through 5 or 3 through 4. I've got them all listed right up front from the rational zero theorem. Now when I graph this, it'll look something like this. If you check it on your calculator. Whoops. I'm not very good at drawing. I'm trying here though. It's going to look something like this, where it crosses at negative 3, it crosses at negative 1, and then it crosses at 2.